Welcome to Unlocking the Parenting Code, all about boys. I'm Kathy, and this season is dedicated to exploring the unique world of raising boys. Parenting boys today can feel like trying to crack a complicated code, a mystery, especially when it comes to understanding their inner emotional world. Together, we'll dive into real life stories, share practical tips, and uncover insights to help you and your son thrive, not just survive. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let's unlock the parenting code, one boy at a time. Welcome back to Unlocking the Parenting Code, all about boys. I'm your host, Kathy, and today I'm excited to welcome Jenna Michael. Jenna is a wife, mother, author, parenting coach, and she is dedicated to helping families embrace simplified and intentional living. She empowers parents, especially moms, to identify their core values, eliminate excess clutter, and create a framework that prioritizes what truly matters. Through her writing and coaching, Jenna provides practical strategies for reducing chaos, making mindful choices, and turning valuable insights into meaningful action. Jenna, welcome to the show.
Hi there. Thank you so much for having me. How are you doing today?
Very good. It's a beautiful day in Japan. This is a beautiful, sunny, clear blue sky spring day. It's a wonderful way to start the day by having my conversation with you.
I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be talking to you today.
So, some of our best inspirations come from challenges that we have in real life. What's the backstory on your focus for wanting to help parents in this way?
I think the best way to describe it would be I wanted to provide parents with insights that I didn't receive when I was entering into parenthood. I read a lot of books. I did all of my research. I am an oldest child, so I was very diligent in all of that, and I felt prepared. And I had my first child, and I felt like there was almost like the record screech where I was like, wait a minute, this is a
Yeah.
lot more complicated than I thought it would be. I was very unprepared for the decisions that I would have to make as a parent and how many there were. And I
Mhm.
was also unprepared for just the onslaught of physical items that were going to come into my household. And I didn't know how to manage that. And I didn't have a strong mom group, friend group that had kids yet. And so I would love more than anything to be able to help parents who are in that life stage kind of anticipate or prepare. So being more proactive than reactive when it comes to some of those things.
That's one of the beautiful gifts that people can give other people. Like you support the growth that someone else is having so that they don't have to face all of the challenges that you face. So that's a very nice way to give back to people.
Yeah.
So you have four young children between the ages of 3 and 8. That's right.
Yes. Yes, I do.
And
Yes.
you're homeschooling. How many are you actually homeschooling?
Two and a half. Can we count one as kind of a half?
Oh,
Because technically,
absolutely.
technically, well, okay, so if we're counting that, then I would say all four of them to some extent. The older two are primarily homeschooled. The younger two are currently enrolled in preschool, but both also have homeschooling curriculum that they complete while their siblings also are doing their homeschooling. So to some degree, all of them.
Okay, so you have four young children, you're homeschooling, you're running a business, and then all the rest of, whatever goes on with being a parent, partner, all of that stuff. Paint me a picture of what a typical, like I've got all kinds of images in my head, but give me an idea of what a typical day looks like in your home.
I mean, it's loud. It's just there's a lot of noise, but I try very hard to wake up before my kids. So I get up very early. My alarm usually is going off by 5, and I'll do my morning Bible study. I probably will get a little bit of work done, whether it's some email catch up or my social media work that kind of gets me started for the day. And I try to do all of that before my kids are awake so that there's less of it that happens once our kids are waking up. There's usually a workout that happens somewhere in there, hopefully in the morning. And then my kids all kind of trickle down throughout the morning. There's not one wake up time that happens. So my youngest will probably wake up around like 6:30 or so, and my oldest by 8:30 I might have to go and pull her out of bed depending on. So
Wow.
breakfast is kind of like a progressive buffet. It's
Hmm.
not how my favorite of how that works, but it it works for right now. And then as people finish breakfast, they kind of move on to get themselves ready for the day. They might start their schoolwork depending on how much time we have. If it's a preschool day, we'll finish up lunches and getting packed. The younger kids will get to preschool, and then the older kids will do their schoolwork throughout that morning. Sometimes while the older girls are doing their homeschool work, I'll be able to pull out my computer, maybe do a little bit of work while they're working. I'll be right on hand. And then once we pick everybody back up from preschool and get back home, we usually spend, unless the weather is super hot or it's, dangerous weather outside, we're probably outside for a majority of the afternoon. And I've just reached the threshold where my kids can play independently in the backyard by themselves. And so I have a spot where I can see them perfectly and I can work for a little bit or read my book and I can see them all playing, or I'll bring it out and sit near them in a chair. And then we will usually play outside until it's time to make dinner. And they really enjoy helping in the kitchen. So a lot of times they'll come in and they'll help me make dinner, and we'll have dinner and my husband will come home. And then it's usually the normal bath time, bedtime rigmarole that comes from having four kids. And then I'm usually in bed about the same time that a lot of my kids are in bed, just because they get up so early. And so I would say usually our house shuts down by about 9 o'clock each night.
There's so many parts of that that sound really idyllic. Like it's kind of, I, it's difficult for me to imagine, and it's kind of, I think it's something everyone would like, but to imagine that you intentionally can create time in your day for you. Like, I think it's so important, but it is so easy. Like, it is so easy to get so focused on all of the things that you never stop and do something as simple as sit outside and read your book while the kids are right there. And the other thing that just kind of struck me is that it seems that this generation is much more susceptible to being kind of sucked in to making sure your kids go to all the activities so that they don't miss out. And so
Mhm.
scheduling and overbooking is a real issue for a lot of families right now. So anybody who can give their children the gift of time and the freedom to be bored, because the boredom is where their creativity and their spark is going to really, get on fire. Like that's a beautiful thing that I don't often hear anymore.
Well, thank you. I've purposely done that. It wasn't always the case for us. We instituted a rule. I think it was after COVID, actually, like when the world kind of came back out of it, where our kids at any given time are only allowed to be in at the max two activities, and they are usually only after the age of 5 able to do that. So before the age of 5, activities are something that's fun, maybe one, but no more than two at any given time, a brain activity and a body activity. So by that I mean a sport and a musical instrument, or a sport and art, or something that's extracurricular that would engage their brain and their body, but only two at those times. Never multiple sports. I love when we can um, find things that happen at the same time. So currently, my two oldest both have interest in gymnastics. So they chose to participate in gymnastics this spring. And I was able to find a class. They're both in separate classes at the same time at the same location. So that was
Wow.
helpful too, just to be able to cut down on an extra activity in a different evening. And then, yeah, my son, who is 3.5, has never participated in an activity outside of a swim lesson. There's been
Mm.
no soccer, there's no t-ball, any of that yet for him, which is honestly rare. for
Yeah.
where I live and for
Yeah.
today's society. And I get that question a lot. Well, what activities is he in? And what sports do
Yeah.
we play? And I'm like, he plays with sticks in mud in our yard
Yeah.
and he loves it and he needs nothing else right now. And so it definitely takes an active stance to be able to establish that lifestyle.
Yeah, absolutely. But like, I mean, there's enough research to back it up, the harm that's happening to children who are overbooked and overscheduled. And on the flip side, the power of giving your children that opportunity to. And honestly, when you've got four kids, having to socialize outside isn't as critical, I would think, as you know, like I grew up with six. So I mean, we basically had our own teams, you know, like if we were getting along, you know, we did well together. So anyway, that was I want to ask you one more thing though. Like why have you chosen to homeschool and how long do you think you're going to like until what age or are you going to homeschool all the way through or how did that come up in your family life?
That is a just seriously wonderful question because I think that if you choose to homeschool, you have to be able to know what your why is because you can really miss the beauty of a lot of moments with anything if you don't know your why. So for us, we actually sent our oldest daughter to kindergarten in the public school system where we live. And I asked my husband, I want to say on a weekly basis, when did kindergarten get so complicated? I kept asking over and over again, when did kindergarten get so complicated? When when did kindergarten get so hard? And I watched our daughter, who this particular child has never met a stranger ever. Like one of her first words was happy. And she's asking strangers in the grocery store, like, are they happy? One time in Costco, she told a lady, she said, I like your baby. Like she just is that kind of a child.
Yeah.
Like she's never met a stranger. And I watched her change that year. She was not herself. She was so unhappy. She just really wilted. And I didn't understand at the time what I do know now, just for education purposes and my children's personalities. And I know that homeschooling isn't for everyone and it doesn't work for every family. But for us, I felt like I wasn't going to mess them up that badly when they were this young. And I really just wanted extra time with them. And so it was an experiment. We started with just a summer where I was like, you know what? Let's just try it this summer. I'm going to buy some books and we're going to do it during the day and whatever. And they did almost an entire grade level of schoolwork within a summer. And I was like, well, we could probably keep going. And it just kind of rolled into it. It was very organic and natural. And we are constantly checking in with ourselves and with our kids. We're finishing up our second full year of it. And we already are planning to go ahead and continue next year. But we're always reassessing because I think that it's important that you and as you as a family continue to evolve, that you allow yourself to be able to evolve. And so we don't have plans to homeschool indefinitely. We're just going to homeschool for right now. And if it happens that we homeschool for the rest of our children's education, that would be fine. Um, but also it's okay if somebody's like, I don't know, I think I want to try this or whatever. So being open to change too.
There are so many different styles and different opportunities. Like I never knew that there was so much out there until I started interviewing parents, and or whether it's just the people that I've been interviewing. But there were a lot of moms who have chosen to homeschool for a variety of reasons, and all of them look different. Like there was
Mhm.
not any two families that were doing it the same or had the same support systems, or it was very interesting. But I certainly like the idea of it being fluid because personally, I believe one of the hallmarks of, I don't want to say successful because I don't think there's failure, but one of the hallmarks of really hitting the mark, you know, raising children, I think is when you follow their lead and you trust that they will show you exactly what needs to happen when it needs to happen. So it kind of keeps you in the moment, keeps you
Mhm.
curious, keeps you tuned in. So
Mhm.
that's a beautiful way.
Thank you. I think so too.
So, in the introduction, I mentioned that you help parents identify their core values. What did you mean by that?
I do. So my work is based off of the idea that when you know what is important to you, it's very easy to say no to the things that are not important, particularly as it pertains to the clutter in your house, the clutter on your calendar, and then maybe where you spend your money as well. And so I love being able to sit down with someone and have them dig deeper into their own value systems, as well as their marriage, as well as their family value systems, and be able to really identify what is it that we're trying to accomplish together as a family? How can we form a family mission statement around these values? And then what does that look like in our life? And the best question that I think anyone has ever asked me with this topic was, if I looked at your calendar or your bank account, would I be able to understand what's important to you? And I will take it a step further and I'll say, if I opened your closet, would I be able to understand what's important to you? And I think that that in itself gives a very clear picture of how it's very easy as a parent right now to be reactive in today's world versus being proactive and establishing boundaries or drawing the line in the sand before you have to figure out where it is and make those decisions. Because when you can filter through, it makes it a little bit easier to say no versus just saying yes to everything that comes your way until you're so overwhelmed or your house is so full that you have to say no because you have no other option.
Interesting. Um, it's funny at this point in my life. So I retired from a career in education for almost 5 years ago now. And we've been, well, I left Canada in 1985. So I've kind of been in a whole bunch of different places, especially once our son went to university in Canada. Then we really went to different countries, different cultures on a more rapid spin. And it was actually when we left the first time, when we left Japan, my son had just finished elementary school. And so we were going to do middle school and high school in a different country. And we had a big old Japanese house, which I had rented that myself first before I ever met my husband, but it was a perfect place to raise a very active little boy because there was so much space inside, not outside, but inside. But I think it's really true. The more space you have, the more stuff you start to accumulate. And when we moved and we realized, oh, it wasn't crap. Like I was going to say crap. It wasn't crap, but all the stuff we had. And then to filter it down, like what's important and what's important to take with us and what can we let go of. And that was the first time that we did that. And then each time that we moved someplace, so like the financial part of it, shipping from one country to another country can be quite expensive. And if you're doing that every year or two, it really adds up. So every time we would move, we would have to downsize. And again, filter through what's important. So by the time we came to the end of this lovely adventure of life, anything that is still in our environment, and we have a very small place, very small, but it's perfect for us. And there is nothing in here that doesn't hold some value in my heart. Nothing. And I wish I had have known sooner what you are helping parents know now, because it kind of fills your heart when there's no clutter, and anything that is in your vision, in your world, are things you've intentionally decided that you want there. So lucky for parents that get to work with you.
Oh, thank you. I agree. I think one, we're really uncomfortable with empty space.
Yeah.
I write about it in my book that if there's empty space, we will try and fill it. And
Yeah.
so it's a really hard thing for us to look even at just a wall. I've left walls in my house purposely empty just for the sake of like, I don't need to put something on that wall. Granted, my kids have filled my walls with art. You should see my hallways are just like taped
Hmm.
up with art, and that's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, we're really uncomfortable with empty spaces. And I don't know where or why that happened, but I actually really strongly advocate for families not to have a playroom if they can help it, because I think that that leads to so much extra work and clutter and collection and cleaning that happens, especially for a mom, that is really not necessary. But because we might have this however many thousand square feet house, oh, it has this great playroom. It's going to be awesome for the kids to play in. If we understand what is really important to us, maybe we turn it into, I don't know, if we have really rambunctious boys, like I love the idea of taking a playroom and putting like mats in it and
Yeah.
like monkey bars and turning it into something that they can really make use of instead of just piles of toys that just accumulate dust. So yeah, I challenge people to have empty space and to be a little uncomfortable with it and see what happens.
One of the biggest the like I said, there are usually pivotal points in your life when something changes. And as far as environment, like the importance of your environment, I really things changed for me when I started to learn more about the Reggio Emilia philosophy. Do you know anything about that?
No, teach me about it.
Well, it's there are some similarities to oh, what's the other? Reggio Emilia and oh, what's the
Oh, wait,
philosophy?
I
Was
think
it
I know what you're talking
Montessori?
about. Yes, yes, I do know. I do know. Now I understand. Yes.
So I was really lucky, like fortunate that when we moved from Japan, the school that I went into, they were that was a focus for the early years. Early years was my main area. And so everyone over a period of years got training in the Reggio Emilia philosophy, and it became like the core professional development that we went through. So I was lucky to be able to go to Italy twice to
Mm.
the place called Reggio Emilia and actually see what it looked like in their facilities. And they talk about the environment as being like the third teacher. Like there's the teacher, there's the parent, and there's the environment. And the difference in things like I really notice it now. So if I go into a space and I see like all the walls covered and all the bright colors, and it really attacks your senses. And I think what happens is that it becomes normal afterwards. So you don't realize when it's gone and when it is strategically designed. And it just, there's beauty. Like it's that whole concept of feeling like "Oh, this feels good."
Mhm.
And and this is early years classrooms. And everything very organized, very minimal. Supplies are minimal, like they're, like color coded so that it's very pleasing to the eye, but also really easy for the children to take responsibility when it's, time to put things away. There's, pictures all, for example, if you had a cupboard that had the things that you needed to have for the children to have access to, and then you would have a picture there of what it looks like when it's looking beautiful. And that's the expectation. And because it's minimal, it's not an overwhelming job. It never gets to the chaos point, but it has a huge impact on behavior and on your sense of well-being. So, yeah, I think it's important.
Yes, I have heard about this, and I think it's fascinating because if you go a step farther, you can use the term decision fatigue
Mhm.
and talk about how it eliminates decision fatigue, particularly for kids. And one of the best examples that I can use is When my daughters were younger, we went into a really, really big puzzle phase. They're still really into puzzles, but they were 2 and 3. They had these big, huge floor puzzles that were like, 4 feet long by three
Yeah.
feet wide. And they would take every single puzzle and they would dump every single puzzle out. And then they would do none of them and they would move on to something else. And what I learned was that they couldn't focus. There were too many options. And so they had a really hard time being able to just choose one puzzle and do it. And so that was, among many other things, the beginning of my understanding of toy rotations and being able to have less options to be able to take some of the decisions away. It also was where I started learning about capsule wardrobes for kids, because that also would relieve some of the decision fatigue. Or
I
capsule
don't know.
wardrobes, not
Yeah, I've never heard that.
similar concept. So basically, you take a curated amount of clothes and they have a much smaller choice, much smaller amount of choices. There we go. I got to get it out. And what it does is it gives them the ability to build autonomy and choose their outfits. You can curate it where everything matches with everything else. Or you can have only their favorites in there. It could be only seasonal things, but it's very helpful because when kids have access to their entire closets, right? The worst thing that ever happens. My 4-year-old's been doing it all this week. It's been driving me crazy. It's every single thing is on the floor. All of the drawers are emptied. Putting laundry away is really difficult. And so when you can take capsule wardrobes and reduce some of those decisions, it really helps. My son has a fabulous capsule wardrobe. All of his clothes fit into essentially 4 bins, and that's it. Like little bins. He knows where these are. He knows where this is. He knows where this is. He can grab anything out of those bins. I don't really even fold them. It makes it much easier for him. And it gives him that sense of pride of like, no, I'm going to pick out my shirt. I'm like, yeah, no problem, man. You go for it and do it. But it does reduce their overload when they're looking in their closets. It's just like, whoa, that's a lot of choices. So taking those back a little bit helps.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. And you said one thing about that was also something that was connected with Reggio, that because of minimalizing the volume of materials that you put out, whether it's, clothing or toys or books or whatever, but the rotation part.
Mm-hmm.
So because everyone does have too much stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So if you like at school anyway, because we had storage and shared resources and things like that. But every month we would just rotate. And if there were 4 puzzles, those 4 puzzles would go back, 4 different ones would come out. And it keeps things fresh, but it also eliminates that kind of, too much stuff out there all the time. And it's the clothing thing. I hadn't heard of that, but I really like it. And again, I'm learning a lot about being in this, we call it the third act, but learning about this time in life, because the last place that we were in Hiroshima for 2 years, and the school had rented us this big, beautiful house that we certainly didn't need. But I was able to, and because of being out in the work world, I had to dress for the occasion. And I had 4 closets, one for each season. And, it was when we moved here, it's like we have one closet and we have no storage space. And so, but I didn't have to usually, only occasionally do I have to, I go back into the school system. But all of a sudden, it's like, okay, what do I really like to wear? And pull those things out. And I don't, we don't really change. We put away the winter coats because it takes up too much space. But otherwise, it's all there all year round. And it is minimal. But we've somehow, as a society, gotten into this thing that more is better.
Mm-hmm. We have.
And it's kind of when you can give someone the experience of how liberating it is to, intentionally make your decisions, but just cut it down. So you're deciding between which do I like better? It's just you like both. So which do I like better?
Well, we used to, I mean, we only know what we know because obviously this is when we live, but it wasn't until truly the Industrial Revolution that people had more and more clothes. Like consumerism in general is a very new topic to humanity. People had the clothes on their backs and maybe an extra pair or two at the
Yeah.
most if you were lucky, right? And it wasn't really until the Industrial Revolution that things kind of began snowballing. And I think we're just really at the place now where the snowball has turned into an avalanche when it comes to what we think that we need or what we're told or advertised that we need when it comes to fashion or things or baby gear
Yeah.
and how that really isn't the case because when you zoom out when you look at where humanity started and how far we've come a long way and there's been really wonderful developments, but also could we maybe be taking it too far in some of these avenues, particularly when it comes to things?
Mhm. Well, being intentional about almost everything is going to help you make decisions. So I know I could stay on this topic for a long time, but I really
Mhm.
want to also, I want to be able to get your experience and expertise on other areas that you have because of what your life is. So you have three girls and now one boy. Have you
Yes.
noticed any differences? Like, I know every child is different. I
Oh,
understand that. But have you noticed any differences between your girls and your boy?
monumental differences. I mean, people will be like, wow, so are boys and girls really different? And my immediate response is always, I am relearning everything about parenting with my son. And not in a bad way. It's just he he requires such a different skill set than my girls do in so many ways. And I think at a basic rudimentary level, his reactions, his needs, everything for him comes from a physical channel. And my girls, it comes from an emotional channel. And so at times when you're juggling both, that can be really challenging. But yes, I have learned so much. And he's only 3.5 right now. So I know I have so much more to learn. But what I have already learned so far, it has been really eye-opening.
Tell me a few examples of that.
Okay, so a really good example would be when they get in trouble.
Mhm.
So, say one of my daughters does something and they know that it's wrong, their immediate reaction is going to be to cry and to make a big fuss. And I'm so sorry, or I didn't mean to, or whatever it is. Like, there's a lot of loud emotional outbursts. With my son, if he does something wrong, his embarrassment or his reaction to it is he's almost like a billy goat sometimes. Like he'll just like headbutt me or like give me a a punch or something. And we're working on it. We're trying, but like his immediate reaction is just like a literal reaction, a physical reaction versus the girls, it's an emotional reaction. So he
Do you
also
understand why?
please I would love to know more about it.
So boys in general, and again, preface it with everybody is on a spectrum someplace, but boys in general have a real aversion to any type of embarrassment or shame.
Hmm.
And so if something has happened, and even if it's, like he's made a mistake, something has happened, he knows he's wrong. Inside, internally, he's embarrassed. And
Yes.
then if you talk to him because of that, then immediately he will go on the defensive. Like, so but it's not because he is aggressive or he's lashing out. It's because inside that little boy is just devastated. And that feeling of being embarrassed or shamed is unbearable. That pain is unbearable. And so if you can like, of course, children always have to be held accountable for their behavior. But if you can get from the misbehavior, Like there's a buzz phrase going around with parents, connect before redirect or something along that line. But give me an example of that kind of a situation. Like what did he do before, what did he do that got him in trouble?
I mean, I genuinely appreciate being able to hear that because I see that in him because you can see the embarrassment in his eyes. You
Yeah.
can see where and I know in those moments that he knows as well. And so that's so interesting that you say that because um I can see that. So a good example for him would be for him when he gets frustrated, I think sometimes since he's young enough to, if he hasn't fully been able to express with the words that he wants to express, and he also is the only boy and he has three sisters and they're sweet as can be, but they can also be bossy, right? They're girls, so they can really try and drive the show. And at some point he just kind of gets frustrated and he might be trying to say over and over again, like, no, that's my toy, or that's my toy, or I want that, or I want that. And then his reaction will be a physical reaction.
Lash
And
out.
it's,
Yeah.
yes, exactly. And so in those moments, it's really fascinating to me to watch him because I can see what it is that he's trying to say. It's just that he hasn't been able to fully communicate that in that moment.
So in that particular time, usually when a boy has some kind of an emotional outburst, usually they need to have a little bit of time to be able to, I guess, kind of self-regulate. Like if it was your daughter that had the same situation happen, she probably would be very capable and ready to have a conversation about what happened immediately. The little boy needs a little bit of space. There needs to be like a transition because that feeling that he had was humongous. And so if
Mm-hmm.
you try to have the conversation with him right after it happens, it probably isn't going to turn out the way you hope it is. So
Mm-hmm.
if you could just take him aside, maybe sit down at the table, have a big drink of water, because water helps with your brain and your regulating, and just sit there without talking. Probably within a very short amount of time, you will see, his body will give you the signals that he is ready. And then instead of approaching it with like, why did you do that? Or that was, you can't hit your sister and that kind of thing. If you get really curious and, like really curious and really empathetic, and even just saying something like, it looks like you were just so frustrated there, it exploded. That must have felt terrible. And then leave it and see what he says.
Mm-hmm.
So you can you can help him develop that vocabulary. You can, like, however you do it, whether it's a daily thing, what, you're shopping, you see someone's face, like you said, your daughter was, saying happy. Well, talk about the different vocabulary in a natural way, like not kill and drill. But he will be able to, and it will get better with time, be able to articulate what that was feeling. Like like he was, not just angry that his sister did that. He probably felt less than. Like he can't keep up with them. You can't keep up with them physically, verbally, like whatever they're doing. He just can't keep up. And that's really difficult. And that causes a lot of embarrassment and shame. So if there's anything added on to that, it's probably too much on his plate for, a little guy to deal with at that time. In the same light, you move to the next step of that conversation and you say, like once you get to the point, you go back and forth and you figure out what really happened from his perspective. And you can go in more detail as he gets older. But then you get to the point like you both understand exactly what happened. And then you talk about, well, that wasn't, that your reaction is not an acceptable reaction. Can you think of another way when that happens? Can you think of another way to respond? And, he might say something like, he could come and get you right away, or I can just walk out, or, whatever, and his response is that idea, that brainstorming will improve with age. And what a lot of parents miss is the next spot that really empowers him. And that's when you say, kind of, I know that this is a really good idea. And the next time you get really upset, you're going to try this. That's a really good idea. You've got that in place. But what's going to happen if you lose control again and you hit your sister again? What's going to be the consequences for that? And he might say, well, maybe I can't play in the same. Like it gets better with age. It's a little more
Hmm.
complicated at 3, so you'd have to really tone down the process. But what it does is that you're not the bad guy. You're not the disciplinarian that's saying, if you hit your sister, you're not going to be able to do this, or this is what you're going to have to do. It's top-down stuff. You want to get to a point that he is saying, okay, if I'm going to try my best, I know I can do it. If I slip, okay, this is what the consequence is going to be, and that will help him remember. It will empower him. And so it will be him making that decision. It's actually it's just a beautiful process to go through. I didn't quite mean to talk that much, apologies for
No,
that.
you know what though? I appreciate that. I also think what you are describing is basically giving him ownership over his behavior and his responses.
Yeah.
And and I think that that's a really helpful way to phrase it. I think one thing that we have found too that really helps is asking a question and then not saying anything and just letting him talk. And this works for all of our kids, but for him in particular, being able to just let him kind of talk through some of that stuff. And more often than not, what happens is he'll be like, yeah, I got mad. And then I shouldn't have done that. That was not a very nice thing to do. And he kind of processes it through his own way. And it's not me sitting there being like, don't do like verbal input, verbal overstimulation. It's him kind of being like, yeah, that wasn't a very good idea. And I think the one of the most helpful things that we can do is to have him be away from his sisters when that happens because they're still young enough that they don't always understand
Yeah.
that either. And I will say, just for the record, that he doesn't treat other children or other people like that at all. It's only
Yeah.
with his most safe people, and his sisters and his parents are most certainly his safest
Yeah.
people. But yes, I do. I just see that embarrassment, and I'm like, oh, sweet boy, like I see that, and I want to help you.
Yeah. It's a really big thing. And when we
Mhm.
when we can recognize that, when we keep that in our mind, it makes a huge difference. Like I know in the classroom, if I needed to speak with a little boy, because it's usually the little boys that are getting in trouble, I would not do it in front of everyone else. I would pull him aside and we'd sit down together so that it was private, it was respectful, and it just makes a big difference to them. It lets them
Mhm.
connect a little bit deeper to you.
Mhm.
Okay, so thinking about your children, what would you say is one of the biggest lessons that you've learned from your children?
Oh man. I think parenting is one long, beautiful, and challenging journey of relinquishing your control and your agenda, of being able to take your ego and put it aside when it comes to a lot of things with parenting. And what I mean by that is just recognizing that your house will never be perfect. It's not going to be HGTV worthy, and it shouldn't be because children live there. It's okay if things get messed up. It's okay if things are messy. Like the idea that perfection is the goal is just never going to happen. And you have to just learn to let go of that control in order to be able to enjoy it. And then I think something else would be that I already am seeing this, and I've been in the weeds of parenting, right? I mean, my kids are pretty close in age, and we literally just finished with diapers not that long ago. And I think that already there are things about baby stages that I just am like, wow, you were so little once and now you're getting bigger and you can do so many things. And it really does feel like each stage just goes quickly. It brings a lot of challenges, but it also brings so much beauty, and each season just changes so quickly. And so being able to really cherish those things and be present for it, because I know today's challenges are going to be tomorrow's memories. And so it's something like what we were just talking about with my son. I know he's not going to be 30 and doing the same things that he's doing now. And so being able to recognize that time goes on and
Yeah.
they're
This
going to
too
get
will
bigger.
pass. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Okay, well, speaking of challenges, um, and because you parent intentionally, have you thought about how you want to prepare or how you are preparing your children to deal with the challenges that they will face as they grow up in connection to their gender?
I would love to say that I'm very prepared with this, but I think that if there's anything that I've learned in my parenting is that I could never say never, right? I would say I would love to have more understanding of it, but I will forever be a student when it comes to this. I want to learn more. Um, I do think there are aspects particularly of masculinity that we've already started exploring when it comes to our son. I don't I don't think that that means then that the flip side is that I'm, only teaching my girls certain aspects of, oh, you only need to be able to do these skills. I want them to be able to do all of them interchangeably, but I have been exploring the idea of, what does it mean to be a man in today's world, and how do you raise a good man, and what does it mean to be a woman in today's world, and how do you raise a good woman? And one of the ways I think that we're really trying to prepare our kids for that is one, allowing them to get frustrated. I know that sounds like a very specific example, but I think that it's really important for them to start figuring out how to figure things out.
Mhm.
And if I solve everything for them, I won't be doing them any favors later. And so allowing them to get frustrated and work things out for themselves in some ways. The other thing would be uh, faith is very important to us. So offering a strong faith foundation in order for them to be able to refer back to and have tangible evidence from our faith moving forward.
Kind of goes kind of goes hand in hand with whatever your core values are. Like that
Mhm.
will help guide them into challenges, how they react and deal with challenges in the future based on their core values and their foundation. And that's what
Mhm.
you're doing now. What would you say are the biggest fears about their future?
I my fears about their future would be that, well, one, that I'm not in it. I want to be able to be there in that for them and support them. I would say another fear would be that they don't feel like I am accessible in their future. I want to be able to be an approachable and active parent for all of their life, and whatever they endure as an adult or a child or a teenager or an adolescent or anything, that they feel they have a strong enough connection to their family to be able to rely on them. And I just think that sometimes today society does a really good job of promoting independence, particularly from your family unit. And I think it's okay to rely on your family. And so I want to be able to foster that and continue to have that grow along into their adult lives.
And that's really, really important because especially when you start looking at different components of mental health, everyone has challenges and it's one thing, the influence and the control we have when they're under our roof. But when they leave, they will face all kinds of challenges on their own. And as far as mental health goes, those children who know that they have at least one person who really does, like, I never understood till I was a parent that I thought it was a clicky phrase, unconditional love. I thought, what's
Mm-hmm.
that all about? Like, I never got it until there were situations that as a parent, I could have really reacted in a different way if I was just looking at the behavior. And that's when I understood, this is what unconditional love is, because although I don't like this behavior, I don't think it's serving my child that well, but it doesn't matter as far as the level of my love. Like that goes like I really get now what unconditional love is. And when a child has that, no matter how old they are, what challenges they face, that will get them through some of those hard times.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Unconditional love, I mean, I agree it is a clicky phrase, but it's such a powerful one. And I've heard before, I love you, but I don't like you in
Yeah.
this moment. I will always love you, but I don't like your
Yep.
behavior in different iterations of that. And one thing that I've already tried to implement into my parenting is in those moments, be like, I love you so much, but I feel frustrated in this moment and I just need to be able to share that feeling. So being able to always start with, I love you. I love you. Because I agree. I think unconditional love, no matter what else happens, if you know you have unconditional love, you're going to be able to hopefully overcome challenges.
So, and I think for parents, like as a parent, if whatever you're doing with your child, and it's not easy, but it's like a muscle that you build up. But if
Mm,
every time there's some kind of an interaction with your child and you are going to respond, if you think, is this response going to make our connection stronger or weaker?
mm,
Because sometimes if you catch yourself, if you just think that for just a second, you will respond differently and you will find another way so that you're keeping your connection strong while you are doing whatever you feel you need to do.
mm,
So, yeah, I think it's quite important. Listen, I
mm,
want to be mindful of time because you're kind of one of these people that I think I could just, sit for a long time and talk with and learn a lot and share a lot. But before we finish, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you wish I had brought up?
Oh, that's a fabulous question. I mean, I don't know. We've covered so much. It's all been so rich and so wonderful. I agree. We could keep going for a long time. I think I would love to know in your experience, do you feel like there have been fears that you have seen from raising your son that you combated like when you were younger that you then were able to fight coming forward? Because you asked me about what are your fears for the future for your children. Were there fears that you had that you were able to overcome or that evolved?
Um, I'm really sensitive and I'm really over analytic about everything. So before he was born, I did a lot of thinking and I understood that the future was a place I couldn't imagine. Like I knew that it would be so different than the world that he was coming into, but I didn't know what it looks like. I didn't know, he wouldn't be choosing career and work in the same way that his dad and I did. Like everything would be different. So that unknown part caused a little bit of fear, but it made me, again, you're talking about core values. And it was thinking about, okay, when he, has his first heartbreak, when he, is challenged by other people or someone not being respectful or fair or any of those things, what can I make sure that he has a solid grip on so that he's got some tools that outlast whatever changes in society or the environment is going to have? So I knew I wanted him to be a lover of books because I felt no matter what's happening, he can escape, he can learn things he's interested in, he can travel in his mind. Like that will be something that he will be able to hold on to no matter what's going on in the world. Another was understanding the connection between our emotions and physical activity. So when he's got that heartbreak, he needs to go for a run, or he needs to take a long bike ride, or he needs to get into the woods. So um, that was important. And then the third thing was I wanted him to understand the power of music and that it could calm him, it could soothe him, it could give him energy, it could make him happy, it could let him, allow him to get his emotions out. So those were the three areas. And because I had thought about that and that was intentionally how I was raising him, it helped keep a few of the fears at bay because I knew he had some tools.
Mm, that's beautiful. I love that.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for answering.
Thanks for asking. It's yeah. Jenna, before we go, I want to make sure that we first say uh, people who want to follow your work, find out where your book is, learn more about this concept of decluttering and all of the things simplifying life, where would they go?
I think the first place you might want to go would be my Instagram. I have an Instagram account. It's called purposeful underscore parenting. I share all kinds of silly, just relatable reels. I am my most authentic self on there.
They're
So,
great. I've
oh,
watched
thank
them.
you.
They're
I
great.
really
Yeah.
appreciate that. I feel embarrassed sometimes with them because I definitely can be goofy on there, but I think that the world needs a little more smiles sometimes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there, I have a website you can find me at, which is yourpurposefulparenting.com. And you can find my book, which is called Let's Choose Less. It's on Amazon.com, barnesandnoble.com. It's also linked on my website as well.
Okay, so I'll make sure that I put all those links in the show notes,
Thank
and
you.
I would highly recommend that people really look at your book because being able to minimalize and declutter has a huge impact on your sense of wellness and your mental health, and it transfers to your children. So,
Mm, I
um,
agree.
so before we go, I always ask two final questions that are just kind of for fun. So the first one is, what would be the title of the movie about your family life? And then what would be a short summary or synopsis?
Oh, the title would be The Family that Gets Really Muddy and Makes a Lot of Laundry. I think is a long title, but
Yeah.
basically the synopsis is we live outside in our backyard and I do so much laundry because they're constantly getting muddy and I wouldn't change it for anything because I really, really, really enjoy seeing my kids discover new things and just explore in nature. And I think that there's so much beauty in being able to watch them work together to do that and just yeah, I think that the movie would be the family that has really muddy clothes and does a lot of laundry.
Yeah, that sounds good. Sounds very good. Okay, so now the last question is, I want you to picture yourself sharing some words of wisdom with whichever of your children has the first grandchild for you. When they're at the moment of bringing a new human into the world, into their family, what would you say?
I would say there are two pieces of advice that I would give. One, no one will ever advocate as strongly as you will for your child, especially when they're little. It's your job to advocate for them and to never feel embarrassed by it. And two, that you know your child best. You were literally made to be this person's parent. And so trusting your instincts is massive. Don't second guess yourself when it comes. Take them to the doctor if you feel like they need to go to the doctor. Make a change when it comes to school or find different shoes if you think they need different shoes. Whatever it is, trust your instincts because you were made to be their parent.
Beautiful advice. Beautiful advice. Well, thank you again, Jenna. Thank you for being on the podcast. And I know how precious a parent's time is, and I hope that you feel I've honored yours today.
Immensely. Thank you.
I am sure that people who listen to it will get some gems that are going to make their life as a parent better. So I appreciate that and thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a joy. I really appreciate it.
And thank you to our listeners for joining us on Unlocking the Parenting Code, all about boys. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and tune in next week for more conversations about raising boys. If you're a parent raising a boy in today's complex world, be sure to explore sonhoodcoaching.com. You'll discover expert guidance and support designed to help you unlock your full parenting potential. As Amelia Gambetti says, this job is too difficult and too beautiful to do alone. Together we can explore this adventure and discover the magic of raising boys.